Greetings from the Coincident in Warwick. We are here with the Spotlight Series. I'm your host, Scott Nerney, for the Rhode Island Wave. We are here with Michael Fink from Rhode Island School of Design, teacher and candidate for Ward 3 Council candidate. Michael, welcome to the Spotlight Series.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit of background on yourself?
Where shall I begin? I was born in the house that I live in. I was born in Roger Williams Park, but on Verndale Avenue. But when I was 3 years old, my parents built a house with a brick gable. And they weren't from Rhode Island originally. My mother was born in Romania on a farm, but she was raised in Montreal and bilingually. And my father was born in London, but his mother died and after giving birth to his brother, and so they became Rhode Islanders, but I was born in Rhode Island. So one of my motivations for running for council representative was the most important reason was I was asked, I was invited to run as an independent, so that the person who represented the Democratic Party would have a conversation and would be tested in terms of ideas and programs, platforms. But I remember watching the house being built, watching the bricks being put on top of each other to make the gable in front. So I had 2 older brothers, but eventually I bought out my brothers, and my children were born in that house, that same house. So I've had deaths in that house and births in that house. So I have real roots in Ward 3. I really know Ward 3. I remember when it was a farm around me, around the house. I remember when there was a nursery where you could buy plants at the bottom of the hill. And there was also the armory. So the parades would come up and down the hill. My street crosses Camp Street, where the French troops camped out during the Revolutionary War. So I really know the neighborhood. And my next door neighbor and I, he's an architect. He and I used to do something called Jane's Walk. We would walk all the newcomers who came to the ward. We would walk them around the block and explain the history of the house, architecturally or ecologically. So one of the reasons I was willing to accept the challenge of running for the ward is that I'm kind of the old man of the mountain, you know. I know the history of every square inch of that neighborhood.
And the people that make it up.
Yes, and the people that make it up.
And you worked at RISD for quite some time, I understand?
I did indeed, longer than anybody in the history of the college.
Wow, congratulations.
Yes, thank you. I just retired a month ago, 2 months ago, now 2 months ago. But I still keep my office until December 31st. So that will be the 65th anniversary of my presence on the RISD campus.
Wow.
But even before then, I took Saturday classes as a child. My brother was more visually talented than I was, but I did take ceramics classes and life drawing classes as a child. So I'm the living history of Rhode Island.
We've seen a lot of different people come and go, and famous people have moved on. Yeah, that's
famous
great.
people and people who are not famous, but who contributed a great deal to me, and I learn a lot from my students. They come from all over the world now.
Yeah.
At first, we were very much a local school. We were born as a school because of the Industrial Revolution, which brought immigrant families with manual skills to work and later to design the products that we sold. The costume jewelry, my aunt worked for that portion of it. But in fact, I do learn from my students because they come now from India, from Africa, from every part of the world. Japan, Korea. I have Chinese students who email me from China, and I ask me for recommendations for their pursuit of other degrees and other careers elsewhere.
The cultural exchange is really important.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. One time, I was walking a group of Korean students and telling them about the history of Benefit Street and the restoration of Benefit Street and all the contradictions. You have a mansion and then you also have a brothel on the same street. And I knew all about that stuff. But the next thing I knew, I was the toast of Korean television and I was speaking fluent Korean. I don't speak a word of Korean, but they dubbed my voice and put me on a program in Korea. So, it's been quite a journey, my 6 decades and more at Rhode Island School of Design. It's been quite a journey. Even when I just stay home, the world comes to me in so many ways.
And what do you feel brings, in addition to knowing the ward and the history, how does your RISD experience translate into being a good candidate?
Well, thank you for asking that question. For one thing, I really do want to use my emphasis on the arts and crafts to encourage the public school system to celebrate the arts much more than they do now. And I want the RISD to send out messengers about the arts, but also to interview the students who are there, who bring the arts, because we have a lot of immigrants still coming into Rhode Island. And they should be able to be poised and productive about what they bring with them. We think people bring nothing with them when they become American, but they bring their cultures and their languages with them. And the public school system should celebrate that fact, not squash it. We asked the Chinese students to cut off their hair. We asked the indigenous people, like the Narragansetts, to surrender their language and their customs. But that's something that my idea is we should celebrate their skills, whatever those skills may be, even survival skills.
And there's a lot of controversy in Providence with different things and folks trying to make things better, but maybe not always the best steps. One of the most recent one is the bike path versus a bike lane.
I'm glad you brought that subject
Sure.
up. That's very close to my program because I don't approve of the bike lanes. I approve of the bike path, but not the bike lanes, because it hurts small businesses. It punishes older people who've lived in their homes for a long time and who are used to driving, parking their car, and then they can carry their groceries or whatever else they purchase, put it in their car, and go home with it. And they stop me on the street and they say, this is a war against older people. So I perceive it that way. I'm sure there's another perspective, and I do listen with respect and with goodwill to my opponents who are running for the same position that I'm running for. I'm not really running for it, I'm standing for it, I'm waiting for it. I'm hoping that my ideas are useful, usable, and valuable. The school system is one thing that I'm close to. The trees, this cap that I'm wearing, I shouldn't be wearing it, but my granddaughter wrote Think Fink on it and then made a little design of a tree with green leaves on it. And on the side I have the Rhode Island flag, which has an anchor because we're the ocean state, and then the American flag. And that's another thing I want to teach and emphasize in the public schools, which is a renewal of patriotism. Patriotism isn't a military thing. It's a very special affection that one should have for the soil, one's backyard, especially with COVID. We can't travel as much as we used to enjoy doing, but we can walk around the block and enjoy the seasonal changes that are happening in Rhode Island, whatever part of Rhode Island you live in, and also the anchor is a symbol of the Bible. I taught a Bible course at RISD. I taught it as poetry. I taught the Bible as poetry. And I teach a bird watching class. I know some of the birds are birds that we would not have welcomed if we knew how they would chase out the native birds. I mean, the swans are beautiful and noble looking, but they're they do damage to the diversity of species that used to flourish here before the fashions changed. And the same thing is true with the little sparrows. Sparrows are part of poetry, but the English sparrow murders the bluebirds. I know that's the case. So there's we should be studying nature more, and that's what I do in my bird class. And I also have the students build bird houses and bird baths, because at RISD we think with our hands, and we think with our eyes. We look at things in a way that people don't learn how to look, even. So those are some of the things that are on my mind.
And talk a little bit about how you reach the different generations, for someone that's fresh into or just out of college versus someone who's 45 into their decent career and their earning years, or a senior citizen. How do you translate what you want them to understand is important to you through all of those different generations?
That's a very evocative question. That's a good question. Well, I'm used to talking to young people. As a grandfather, I'm used to talking to very young people. But in terms of older people, that's my generation, is older people. But what about the middle-aged people? Well, some of my former students are having a very hard time right now. The small farms are in trouble, and in serious trouble. And so one of my students, who used to milk his goats and cows and bring the milk unpasteurized for lunchtime and share those treats with me, and now he's lost the land, and he has nothing now. But I don't judge success by conventional standards. I think as long as you have a skill, as long as you have a smile on your face, your life is good. It's good to be alive. And so I'd like to answer your question in a useful way, but I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. How do I talk to people who are not of my generation? I don't know. I try to go on being a teacher. We all like to tell our stories, but we like to learn new stories too. And I respect my rivals in the race. I think they know things, even if they don't come originally from Rhode Island, as I do. Even if their background doesn't have the diversity that my background has. You know, I was telling you a few minutes ago that I didn't know any of my cousins, and because I was a Depression baby, and therefore when the war came, you couldn't travel. And my Canadian relatives one day came in a car, crowded car. In those days you didn't have seat belts, so you could just pile into a car. And all of a sudden these beautiful teenage cousins came out of the car, and after that I would go to their weddings, and I would drive over the borders into Canada. But the essence of Rhode Island is the fear of travel. Most people in Rhode Island want to put down the anchor and stay put.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
And they want to know what's happening in their area and just their area.
Yes.
And what's going to impact them.
Yes.
So if you're speaking to someone who's watching this and is in Ward 3 and thinking about who they should vote for, there's someone that they've heard the name before, and then there's someone that they don't really know the name. What would you say as kind of a wrap up to them as to why they should consider your side of it?
My granddaughter made a little program and tried to take the name Fink, F-I-N-K, and give each part of it a different meaning. So she wanted the F to stand for the bike path, and the I, independent. Nobody gave me a penny. The N was for native. That's a dangerous word, but it means that I'm a native of the ward. That's all it means. And the K is the one that gets me in trouble with my wife. She thinks the word keep is a dangerous word, because I translate it for myself into keep the past alive. I'm not really crazy about the concept of progress. I think every improvement, like the automobile, has its negative side. We walk less when we drive more. So walking around the block is a good thing, and keep the good things from yesteryear and from yesterday. So I do believe in keeping. I even believe in keeping keepsakes. I'm a sentimentalist. I'm something of a hoarder. If somebody gives me a gift, if somebody writes me a letter or a postcard, I keep it forever, and I rediscover it. I don't want to forget friends. I don't want to forget former students. My alums stay in touch with me for a very long time. Some of them are my age, some of them are even older than I am. Some of my former students. They were already married when they came to RISD. You know, RISD was a school of design, and design is an important word. It's not even an art school, it's a design school. And so that's why the K in Fink. So I don't know why they should remember me. I mean, I'm a public person by nature. I've written in many different community newspapers over the years. I was telling you about that. I worked for a Portuguese newspaper, the Portuguese American Journal. I worked for the Italian Echo for a number of years, writing a column, for the Narragansett Times and the South County Independent. And so I've never been quiet about who I am and what I am. And the name Mike Fink was made famous by Walt Disney. Mike Fink, King of the River. And I always had a boat, always. A canoe, a kayak, a life raft. And I know Narrow River especially well, but I also know the 100-acre cove in Hampton Meadows in Barrington. So I'm a water boy, you know. I'm a water boy with an anchor and a bucket.
Well, I think the fact that people have stayed in touch with you for so long and looked up to you for advice and guidance and leadership, I think plays well. I want to wish you a lot of luck in your race.
Thank you for saying
and
that.
Congratulations on over 60 years at the school.
Thank you, Scott.
Setting a record that likely will never be beat.
That's true.
You'll own that forever. And I want to thank you for coming on the Spotlight Series.
You're very kind. In fact, I'm very glad to be here.
Great.
In this lovely place, the Coesit Inn, which is a bar among other things, and of course I love my wine. I have a very good friend who has his own vineyard in Johnston, and I buy my wine, you know, by the case when I go out there. White wine named for his mother, Amelia, and the Nick wine, the wine that his father was a land surveyor here in Rhode Island, not far from here, in Garden City though. That's a little bit of a distance from here by Rhode Island standards.
All right.
Anyway, thank you again very much for
Sure.
inviting me and for asking me these questions and for telling me your stories, and which I appreciated enormously.
No problem.
Really.
Thank you.